Your Honor, the state objects. A child cannot question a witness in a felony hearing. The words cut across a courtroom that smelled of floor wax and cold radiator heat. February light came in gray through the tall windows, thin and honest. A girl stood at the defense table. She was small enough that the lectern would have swallowed her, so a clerk had set a wooden step in front of it. Her braid was neat. Her chin was level. My name is Wren Ferro, Your Honor. I am 10 years old. The defendant is my mother. I am standing here because every lawyer in this state closed her file and went home. The prosecutor, a tall man in silver-rimmed glasses, turned to the bench with the patience of someone who had never lost a room. The state's time matters, Your Honor. So does an innocent woman's freedom, sir. Wren said it before she could stop herself. A pew creaked behind her. The judge took off her glasses and looked at the girl for a long moment. What no one in that room knew was that the whole case rested on a single number in the corner of a photograph, and that number was wrong by exactly 1 hour. Before I tell you what Wren asked and why it ended 12 years in about 90 seconds, let me take you back 3 years, to a narrow gray house near the rail line, and a woman who could mend anything except the town's opinion of her. Before we go on, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read everyone. Coldbrook, Vermont, is one of those towns the highway forgot. The paper mill let go of half its people the year Wren turned 6. What stayed was the church, the diner, the hardware store, and the freight line that ran along Depot Street and split the town in two. Della Ferro fixed things for a living. She ran an alterations table out of the front room on Sorrel Lane, and 3 days a week she pressed shirts at the dry cleaner on Main. Her fingertips were always a little pricked, always faintly warm from the steam press. People brought her wedding dresses that no longer fit and funeral suits bought in a hurry, and she made them right. She never charged the Pettibone widow a cent. Cloth doesn't know you're broke, she liked to say. It just knows if you're patient. Her husband Elias plowed roads in winter and loaded pallets at the mill the rest of the year and came home smelling of diesel and wet salt. Wren was 8 then, small for her age, and so quiet that grown-ups forgot she was in the room, which suited her because she was busy remembering everything they said. Della once quizzed her from an old railway timetable for fun, and Wren recited a full column of departure times without a miss. The trains were their thing. Della's father, Gus, had worked the crossing signal at Depot Street for 31 years, and when he passed the winter before, the only thing Della kept was his railway pocket watch, a heavy silver thing that still ran true. On summer nights, she and Wren sat on the back steps in the dark and named the trains by their horns before they reached the crossing. The short 2-note local at supper, the long, low freight at 9:05, the one that rattled the windows and made the dog hide. The trains don't lie, baby, Della told her once. People forget. Clocks drift. But the 9:05 has crossed Depot at 9:05 since before you were born. It mattered more than anyone in Coldbrook could have guessed. There was one more thing Della used to say, usually with a needle between her lips. Wren wrote it inside the cover of her first notebook. A lie is just a knot, Wren. Find the loose thread and pull it slow. She had no idea her daughter would take her literally. On a Tuesday night in March, someone pried the back door of Coldbrook Feed and Hardware, emptied the register box, and cleared the shelves of cordless drills and copper wire. Whoever it was left through the alley on the rail side. No one was hurt. The store was closed for the night. The building's one working camera hung crooked over the loading door and caught a figure moving through the dark. Tall, broad in a long coat, hood up. The timestamp glowed white in the corner. 8:14 p.m. Della owned a long charcoal coat, and everyone in town had seen it. 2 winters back, when money was thin, she had cleaned the hardware store on Sundays and carried a key for a month before she gave it back. On paper, that made her someone who knew the layout and owned a coat. In Coldbrook that March, that was enough. Emmett Shaw ran the register at the gas station across Depot Street. He told the deputies he had stepped out for air and seen someone run from the hardware lot toward the tracks. When they showed him a photo of Della, he took a breath and said the words that would cost her 3 years of her life. I believe that was her. I believe so. They came for her on a Thursday. Wren was at the kitchen table with fractions and a broken pencil when the headlights swung across the wall and the knock rattled the plates. Della came out with her hands already up, chalk dust still on her apron. There's a mistake. I was clocking in at Birchwood. Call them. Ask what time I badged in. They cuffed her under the porch light where the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Della turned once before the door shut and found her daughter's eyes through the screen. She mouthed 3 words, slow and clear. I'll come home. Wren stood in the doorway with the pencil still in her hand. Bail was $40,000. For the Ferros, it might as well have been $40 million. Elias took a 3rd job hauling 2 counties over. The bank moved on the house by autumn, and they took a 1-bedroom over the shuttered 5 and dime, where the pipes knocked all night and the one window faced brick. Elias gave Wren the bedroom and slept on the couch. He never once called it a sacrifice. Della's public defender was a man named Marty Hollis. Not a bad man, a drowning one, with 90 cases in a caseload built for 30. He met her 20 minutes before her arraignment and told her to take the plea. Pull my time card from Birchwood, she said through the glass. I badged in at 9. Just pull it. Hollis wrote something in his folder. He never pulled it. The trial ran 4 days. Coldbrook took less time to decide. Prosecutor Roland Keck owned the room the way a preacher owns a pulpit, and he was 4 months from announcing a run for district attorney. He played the 12 seconds twice, at speed and slow, letting the timestamp glow each time. Della had told the deputies she left home around 8 and rode the late bus across town, which on paper left her a window near 8:14 with no one to vouch for her. Keck leaned on that window until it opened. She had the time, she had the coat, she had a key to that building once, and here she is on the state's own camera at 14 minutes past 8. Hollis cross-examined Emmett Shaw for 9 minutes and asked nothing about the dark, the distance, or the clock. In the second row, an 8-year-old girl wrote 4 words in a notebook. No one asked about the train. The jury came back in 3 hours. Guilty. 2 weeks later, the judge handed down 12 years. On the courthouse steps, Keck buttoned his coat for the cameras. Coldbrook is safer tonight. Behind the crowd, a man in a mill jacket steered his daughter out a side door, away from the lenses. Wren did not cry in the courtroom. She cried that night into a pillow with the lights off so her father would not hear. Then she stopped, and she did not cry again. The first appeal was filed by Hollis, who spelled Della's middle name wrong on the cover. It was denied in 9 pages. No new evidence. No grounds. The system had graded its own paper and passed itself. Visiting day was the first Sunday of the month. 2 hours on a bus each way. Empty your pockets. Walk the detector, wait in a gray room under a clock that ran slower than any clock on Earth. Della got thinner every visit, but she always smiled first and asked about school before anything else. Then came the Sunday, in the second winter, when Wren stopped answering and asked instead, Mom, what time did you badge in that night? The real time. Della blinked. 9, baby. A minute or 2 after. The machine beeped and the hall clock said 9. Why? The store's on Depot. Birchwood is out past the mill. That's 11 miles. I measured it on the library map. Wren's voice was flat. If you were badging in at 9, you couldn't be on a downtown camera at 8:14. Somebody's clock is wrong. Della reached across the bolted table and held her hands, the pricked fingertips warm even in that cold room. Don't you carry this, she whispered when the guard called time. This is not yours to fix. But on the long ride home, Wren did the arithmetic of the years. 12 of them. She would be 20 when her mother came home. Somebody's clock was wrong. The trains don't lie, her mother had said. Clocks drift. A lie is just a knot. She decided to find the loose thread. If you want to know what a 10-year-old found in that file that 9 trained lawyers walked right past, make sure you've hit subscribe. Because what she noticed changes everything. Wren started where her mother had told her to, with patience. She asked Mr. Halloran at the library where they kept the real law books, and he led her to a dim shelf of Vermont statutes nobody had cracked in years. The words fought her at first. Post-conviction relief, newly discovered evidence, She hunted everyone she did not know in the dictionary at night, the way she had once hunted through the sewing manual. And when a librarian said the binders could not leave on a child's card, Halloran issued her an adult card and dared the room to argue. She learned the phrase that would run her whole life for a year: motion for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence. Then she wrote the clerk for her mother's full file under the open records law, rewriting the letter 11 times until it sounded like an adult. She earned the $29 copying fee shoveling walks. The envelope came back thick as a brick. Police reports, witness statements, the full transcript, every still frame from those 12 seconds. She read Emmett Shaw's statement so many times she could recite it, and buried in the middle, treated by everyone as color, was one line. Shaw had told the deputy he had just stepped back inside from watching the freight go by when he saw the runner. Wren circled it, then set it aside because she did not yet understand what it was worth. The night she understood came in October, past 11, her father asleep on the couch. Wren sat at the desk with the clearest still frame, the tall figure in the long coat frozen mid-stride at the hardware lot, and moved a $2 yard sale magnifying glass across it the way you check a hem for a dropped stitch. There, at the edge of the frame, small and half washed out, were 2 red circles and a black and white arm angled down across the road, the crossing signal. Lit. The gate arm down. She had seen it 100 times and never studied it. Why would anyone study a train gate when the timestamp already tells you the time? Then the whole apartment shook. Outside, past the brick, the 905 leaned into the crossing and let out its long, low horn, right on schedule, the way it had every night of her life. Wren looked up, she looked back at the photo, and she stopped breathing. The gate at Depot Street only comes down when a train is crossing. A train only crosses on the schedule. There was no train at 8:14. The evening freight was the 9:05. The timestamp in the corner and the gate in the corner could not both be telling the truth. She checked her grandfather's old timetable, then the library's current copy the next morning. No scheduled crossing anywhere near 8:14 at night. Only the 9:05. Which meant the person in that coat had walked into the hardware lot an hour later than the state claimed. And at 9 on the dot, 11 miles across town, Della Ferro had beeped her badge at the Birchwood staff door under the eyes of the night supervisor. Wren shook her father awake. "Dad, get up, I found it." Elias made her explain it 3 times, then sat on the edge of the couch with his face in his hands and made a sound she had never heard from him. But finding it was not the same as proving it. She needed a lawyer who could take a loose thread and file it as a motion, and every lawyer in the county had already closed the door. Frances Aldridge had watched the girl for months before she said a word. 74, retired after 4 decades of appellate work, she came to the library every morning for the crossword and the quiet. But the quiet kept being broken by the same small girl hauling gray binders to the corner table, like a woman carrying stovewood. One morning, curiosity won. "That's heavy reading for a young lady." "It's not reading, ma'am, it's studying. How to reopen a case." "Whose case?" "My mother's." Something in the girl's voice did not belong to a child. Frances tested her, the way you tap a wall to find the beam. "Tell me the standard for newly discovered evidence in the state." Wren counted it off on her fingers, and where she stumbled like a first-year law student, not a 10-year-old. Frances put down her pencil. "Bring me the file. I'll look at it once. Understand me. Once. I'm retired." She read it until the library closed around her, then sat at her own table until 2 in the morning with the transcript and cold tea. A woman doing 12 years on 12 seconds of blurry film and 2 words from a nervous man. I believe. She called Elias the next day. "My name is Frances Aldridge. I'm an attorney, and I would like to help your wife. No fee. Please don't insult me by asking twice." At the kitchen table that Sunday, she laid the hard truth out plain. To reopen this, we need something the jury never saw. A photograph of a signal is not proof of a train. We need the railroad to say, in writing, that a train crossed Depot Street that night and at what minute. Without that, the gate is just a smudge. So Frances wrote the railroad for the movement log for the Coldbrook crossing that date. Wren caught a wrong track number in the request before it went out, and Frances let her fix it herself. Then came 6 weeks of silence. Wren checked the mailbox before anything else in her life. 2 envelopes came the same week. The first was the movement log. A northbound freight had cleared the Depot Street crossing that night at 9:07 p.m. Nothing else crossed for hours on either side of it. The second was from the Superior Court. Frances had already filed the motion. Wren read it, holding her breath. Motion granted. Evidentiary hearing scheduled. The Honorable Adele Marsh presiding. A hearing is a door held open a crack, Frances warned her that night. Nothing more, and Roland Keck will spend every minute trying to slam it shut. The hearing fell on a gray morning in February, almost 3 years after the gavel first came down on Della Ferro. Word had traveled, and the courtroom held more people than the trial ever had. Reporters filled the back. Mill workers came in clean shirts. Half of Sorrel Lane came in their church clothes. Della came in through the side door in a plain dress Frances had sent to the facility. Her eyes found Elias, then found her daughter at the defense table with a stack of folders, and Della had to look at the ceiling for a while. Keck arrived with 2 assistants and a cart of file boxes, looking exactly as he had 3 years before, only more polished. He paused at the table and lowered his voice for Frances alone. "Retirement was kinder to you than this morning will be, counselor." "Then let's keep the morning short," Frances said without looking up. Judge Adele Marsh took the bench at 9 sharp. Fair, quick, no patience for theater. Frances rose. "Frances Aldridge for the defense, Your Honor. Counsel of record. With the court's permission, the new evidence will be presented by my associate. She found it." She set her hand on Wren's shoulder. "Your Honor, the state objects." Keck was up. "A child cannot question a witness in a felony hearing." "Then explain to me, Mr. Keck, why there is a young lady at my defense table." Marsh looked at Wren over her glasses. "Miss Aldridge, is this a performance?" "No, Your Honor. It is the opposite of one. The court has discretion over who addresses it in an evidentiary hearing. My associate will work under my direct supervision. No one alive knows this evidence better. I would only be reading her notes aloud and reading them worse." "Your Honor, the state's time matters," Keck said. "So does an innocent woman's freedom, sir." Wren said it before she could weigh it. Marsh tapped her pen twice. "I'll allow it. Under supervision. Within limits, young lady. This courtroom runs on rules. Break one and you sit down. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." The clerk set a wooden step in front of the lectern. Wren climbed it and began, and her voice cracked on the first sentence. A reporter in the back chuckled, and the sound landed on her like ice water. She stopped. She found her mother's eyes. Della nodded once, slow and steady, the way she used to nod over a stubborn seam. "Take your time. Pull the thread slow." Wren started again, and this time her voice held. She walked them through it, plain and unhurried. The state's own still frame, the same 12 seconds that convicted her mother. The timestamp reading 8:14. And in the corner of that very frame, the Depot Street crossing signal lit and the gate arm down. She entered the railroad's movement log. 1 freight crossed Depot that night, at 9:07, and nothing else came near it for hours. A gate that is down means a train is crossing, Your Honor, and a train only crosses on the schedule. So the person in this photograph was there at 9:07, not 8:14. The camera's clock was wrong by an hour. Keck was on his feet. "Objection. Speculation. Counsel wants this court to throw out a jury verdict over a blur that might be a train gate, might be a shadow. There is no foundation." He buttoned his jacket and addressed the bench with the calm of a man who had won this room 100 times. "The defense has built a cathedral on a smudge, Your Honor. The state convicted Della Ferro on evidence. A child's homework does not outweigh 12 jurors." "Mr. Keck raises a fair point," Marsh said. "The gate alone is a question, not an answer. Who can speak to that camera's clock? Who set it?" "The store runs a cheap recorder, Your Honor. The owner can speak to it. And the man who saw the runner can tell us about the train. Emmett Shaw. He's on our witness list." Marsh checked the list, then the clock on her own wall. "We'll hear Mr. Shaw after the recess. 30 minutes. In the hallway, Frances pulled Wren into the small attorney's room and shut the door. "Everything runs through that man now. If Shaw says he can't remember the train, the photograph goes back to being a smudge and the door closes for good. And I just watched one of Keck's people talk to him by the fountain for 4 minutes. Fear edits memory, and that man has had 3 years and 1 hallway to get afraid. Wren took a single sheet from her folder and turned it around. 9 questions. 8 had pencil lines through them. The 9th was written underneath in small, careful letters. Frances read it twice, then sat back slowly. You're not going to ask him about the camera at all. No, ma'am. If I ask about the camera, he gets to say he doesn't remember. People don't remember cameras. Wren folded the sheet. But everybody in Coldbrook remembers the 9:05. Court came back in. Emmett Shaw took the oath with a dry mouth and sat like the chair might give under him. Within limits, young lady, Marsh said. Make them count. Wren climbed the step. She did not open her folder. She knew the question by heart, and she looked at the nervous man the way her mother had taught her to look at a knot. Patiently, kindly, even. Mr. Shaw, what time does the evening freight cross Depot Street? Keck half rose. Objection. Relevance. It goes straight to the timeline, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Answer, sir. Shaw blinked. There was nothing in the question to fear. 9:05, he said. Give or take. Same as it's crossed my whole life. I always step out and watch her go by. Thank you, sir. Wren lifted a page. This is your statement to Deputy Rourke the night of the burglary. Your own words. You said you had just stepped back inside from watching the freight go by when you saw someone run from the hardware lot. Is that true? It's true. I'd just come in from the tracks. You just watched the 9:05 cross. That's right. Wren set the page down. The courtroom had gone very quiet. Mr. Shaw, if you had just come inside from watching the 9:05 go by when you saw that person run, then how could it have been 14 minutes past 8? Nobody moved. Shaw opened his mouth and closed it. His eyes went to the prosecution table and found nothing there. Then his whole face changed. The fear drained out of it, and under the fear was something buried for 3 years. Plain, ordinary truth. It wasn't 8, he said slowly. It couldn't have been. The train had already gone. It was after 9. It was always after 9. They showed me that timestamp and told me the camera doesn't lie. I figured I remembered it wrong. But I didn't. I watched that train, and then I saw somebody run. It was gone 9. Judge Marsh leaned forward. The camera at the hardware store. Does anyone know if its clock was ever set? The store owner answered from the second row before Shaw could. I never touched it, Your Honor. That box came with the building. It resets to some fool default every time the power blinks, and out on that line the power blinks all winter. I don't watch the clock in the corner of a security tape. Frances was already standing. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit 4, the county dispatch log. The owner's 911 call came in at 9:21 that night. Exhibit 5. Delaferro's badge record from Birchwood, stamped at the staff door at 9 p.m., 11 miles from Depot Street. Exhibit 6. The sworn statement of her night supervisor who stood beside her at that door. Every clock in this case agrees, Your Honor. The train, the dispatch log, the badge, the witness's own memory. Every clock but one. And that one was never set. At the defense table, Della sat with her fists pressed together under her chin, shaking, while 3 winters of a stolen life were handed back to her one exhibit at a time. Keck fought. He demanded the chain of custody on the dispatch log. Frances had it. He suggested the supervisor was covering for a friend. The supervisor sat in the gallery beside a row of Birchwood staff, all on the record. He argued a woman could slip out of a badged building, drive 11 miles, break into a store, and drive back inside the hour. For the first time in years, Roland Keck stood in a courtroom with nothing left to say. No further questions, he managed, and sat down. Wren gathered her one page and stepped down. She looked very small walking back to the table, and the silence she walked through was enormous. Judge Marsh took a 40-minute recess. Nobody left. When she came back, she read her ruling in a voice that carried to the last row. The conviction rested on a single video timestamp, now shown to be wrong by a full hour, contradicted by the railroad log, the dispatch call, the witness's own account, and the badge record that put Della Ferro 11 miles away. The verdict cannot stand. The conviction is vacated. Mrs. Ferro, this court orders your release, and it offers you the one thing it owes you, an apology. The gavel came down, and the room came up at once. A deputy crossed the floor and took the cuffs off Della, and the sound they made coming loose was small and dry, nothing like the music it should have been. Della stood there rubbing her wrists like a woman who had forgotten how to move without asking. Then her daughter hit her at a dead run, and Della went down on one knee and caught her, and the two of them stayed folded together on the floor while Elias reached them and made the three of them into one shape. "You found the loose thread," Della kept saying into her daughter's hair. "You told me where to pull," Wren said. When the room quieted, Judge Adele Marsh did a thing the bailiffs had never seen. She came down off the bench and stood in front of a girl whose head did not reach her shoulder and put out her hand. "This morning I asked if you were a performance. I nearly refused you this room. That would have been the worst mistake of my career." Wren shook her hand. "I've watched a great many lawyers in 30 years. Most would have asked all 9 questions. You asked 1. Roland Keck packed his boxes alone. His name came off the campaign signs before the vote was ever held, and within a month, the county opened a review of every case that old hardware store camera had ever touched. Emmett Shaw waited by the doors, turning his cap in his hands, and when the family reached him, the apology came out broken. Della had every right to walk past him. She took his hand instead. "You told the truth today when it cost you something. That's the part I'll keep." The state paid Della a settlement for the years it stole. She used part of it to buy back the little shop on Main and hung a new sign over the door. "Ferro and daughter. Alterations." She stood back and looked at the second word longer than the first. She mended the Pettibone widow's coat the first week. Free, because some things in a person don't change no matter what is done to them. Elias sleeps in a bed now. The couch is just a couch. Wren went back to being a kid, mostly. But on the first Saturday of every month, she rides her bike to the library, where an old appellate lawyer holds a corner table and teaches her the things the gray binders can't. Frances framed exactly one thing from her 40 years of practice and hung it in her kitchen, a single sheet of paper with 9 questions on it, 8 crossed out in pencil. Della keeps her father's railway pocket watch on the shop counter where she can see it while she works. It still runs true. She tells the customers who ask that it belonged to a signalman who spent 31 years making sure the trains told the truth. She doesn't always tell them the rest. That a wrong clock nearly buried her, and the trains are what dug her out. Here's my question for you. If you had been in that courtroom when a 10-year-old girl climbed a wooden step to question a grown man under oath, would you have leaned in and listened, or would you have laughed with the reporter in the back row? Be honest about it in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, share it with one person who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Burn Bridges Club, because there are more like it waiting to be told. I told you this one because a whole town was ready to write a woman off, and the only person stubborn enough to keep pulling the thread was 10 years old. Talent doesn't check your age, your address, or your last name. It waits for one person patient enough to look at the corner of the frame everyone else skipped. Somebody near you is waiting to be looked at too. Look closer.